Prologue. The last thing I remember is hearing a loud fan noise. As I was waking up on the sand, I pushed myself up to look at the strange people staring at me with a surprised look. I want you to imagine being on the ground, and instead of anyone telling you what's going on, they just stare at you. Yeah, I know, kind of mean. Around them, though, was a dark, gloomy forest and a beautiful ocean with not-so-calm waves. I tried to lower my attention by looking down, but then I noticed a note under me in neat handwriting which said, Mallory. It did sound familiar. I started looking harder at the note, and the number 20 written in a slightly different way, more like non-straightened lines. I picked it up and showed it to the strange people in front of me, but to my shock, it disappeared right when everyone saw it. While I was thinking, how dare it ignore physics, the girl sighed and claimed it was my name and age. This was the only thing she said. Why can't anyone just tell me what is happening? So, I just looked down quietly, trying to adjust to my surroundings, which is an excuse for me to not say that I was just staring at the muddy sand. Chapter 1. Exploring the island. I scanned around the place until a tall, black-haired girl with pinkish eyes and a gray mask on her walked up to me and exclaimed, I'm Kalish, and I'm guessing when I wasn't on this island, I was trying to be a ninja, but I may have just been dressing up as a ninja. While I was thinking, okay, I really don't know who walks up to someone and introduces themselves like that, but I did eventually say, hopefully you are good at being a ninja. I pointed to the forest and nervously yelled, who knows what's in that forest behind you? Kalish nodded slightly and tried to change the mood by splashing water at me and yelling at all of us, we should probably explore the island and find things for survival, but please may I go with Mallory? The angel-like girl with black hair and blue eyes behind me giggled, only if I can come too. So, while the others started getting into groups, my little trio set off into the forest. As we walked through the forest, the angel-like girl caught up to me and mumbled, I'm Caitlin, and I'm an angel if you haven't noticed. I smiled at her while I was trying to scan my surroundings. After 4 long minutes of us walking around, we started to notice something was off. We looked back to see what was behind us, and a princess-like tabby cat was staring at us on top of a tree. Kalish started yelling at the poor thing while I approached it in a careful manner. Hey little princess, I jokingly but in a calm manner said to the cat. The other two started to catch on with the joke and quietly giggled. For some reason the cat got startled by the laughter and sprinted away, leaving me upset at the other two. Caitlin commented, we shouldn't be messing around with cats. We should be looking for resources and mapping our surroundings. I nodded and we started to walk. After walking for basically eternity, we finally made it back to where I guess was camp. Some people started building tents by building a pyramid of sticks and covering it with leaves to sleep in while the others talked and relaxed, which caused me to roll my eyes. At the same time, Caitlin, Kalish, and I built our tent. Since Kalish was 13 and was the youngest, Caitlin made her take breaks in between. Caitlin acted like the mom of everyone, even though she was also a lot younger than everyone else. I really admired her for that. After a while, I went into the forest without anyone knowing. Since the moon was centered in the sky, I assumed it was midnight, even though I wasn't sure of it. As I walked through the forest, I looked around trying to map the whole island in my head. After the moon moved a little to the side in the sky, it was then I started feeling tired. I started to walk back when I saw the cat that I had seen earlier before me. I smiled and approached it. I started to pet it when it jumped in my arms and purred. I smiled and petted it while I walked back with it in my arms. As soon as I got back to my tent, it had already fallen asleep, and I did soon after. When I woke up early in the morning, the cat was gone, but all my tent mates were asleep. I looked around for the cat until I realized the cat was probably home. I sighed and went out of my tent to see an old-looking man laying where I woke up. And for some reason, my mind was saying, help him. But I walked away. As I walked down through the island, I felt like something was following me. I looked back to see a short girl with blonde hair and blue eyes that looked like she was about to perform in a circus, which was smile at me, which totally wasn't creepy at all. I jumped at the sight. The girl standing behind me said in apology, I'm sorry. I was trying to see what you were doing, but now I can see that was kind of creepy. While the girl looked down disappointed in herself, I muttered, "Yeah, I really don't trust anyone here, and I'm Mallory, you?" The girl then claims, "I'm Eclipse and I already know who you are." I soon noticed she was the girl who claimed my name was Mallory and my age was 20. After a few minutes of talking, Eclipse and I departed ways since I wanted to explore more of the island while Eclipse wanted to go back to sleep. As I walked through the tall grass and short bushes, the tress started to darken the forest sky. When I turned to walk back, I saw a dragon's shadow move away. Like the dumb adult I am, I ran after it. I made it about a mile until the shadow disappeared. I felt a cold shiver down my spine. I ran as fast as I could back to camp because I'm dumb and didn't think to go check what was happening. But by the time I got back, I convinced myself that I was hallucinating, but deep in my heart, I knew it was something. By the time I got into the tent, Caitlin knew something was up and whispered, "Are you okay? You seem off." I kept quiet and laid down on the hard ground and went to sleep in the tent. Caitlin got the message and laid back down next to Kalish. After the sun came upon the island, we got back to exploring. This time we decided to go with different people so we could meet others. I got paired up with a demon guy with gray hair and grayish eyes named Taylor. Eclipse and I decided to explore the edge of the forest while Taylor joked around, not taking anything seriously. When we got halfway to the spot, I saw the dragon-shaped shadow. Taylor thought it would be funny to play tag. As he ran away, I noticed a huge hole that was covered with sticks and leaves on the ground. I cried out, "Stop!" Taylor heard the stress in my voice and stopped, and he looked down and slowly backed away. I knew he was scared from when he turned around. He looked like he was about to scream, but he mumbled, "New rule, no tag." Eclipse faked a smile and said, "I agree. Let's head back, guys." I nodded as we turned back towards the camp. When we got back, we sat down and waited quietly. I could still see the horror in Taylor's eyes, which I understood completely because all we knew that thing could have been a trap to his death. We saw the first trio come out, then a group of 4, and the rest of the trios slowly escaped the dark forest into the sunlight. Soon everyone was sitting down to hear what happened in the forest with my trio, and slowly they became the same face of Taylor, horrified. That's when we noticed it was more than an island. Soon after we all calmed down, we went back to our tents to talk with our tent mates. However, Kalish and Caitlin wouldn't stop asking me questions, even when I asked them not to. After a few minutes of non-stop questions, I heard a calming meow coming from outside the tent and a soft creature brushed against me. I looked down to see a cute calico cat.
カリッシュグリーテドザキャットバイセイング。こんにちは。お元気ですか小さな猫。
Which the translation was, "Hello, how are you little cat?" Then she paused and said, "I remember something." She started to smile when the cat went on to cuddle with her. Kalish goes on to state, "I remember I was a ninja trainee, and I can remember a stray black cat who I feed and loved the thing." Kalish pauses, then tears up and muttered, "It died." Caitlin, who looked like she was still in shock, ran to hug Kalish, but I felt jealous. I looked down to see the cat gone. I sighed and mumbled, "Where do you keep wandering off to?" After what felt like an eternity, Kalish stopped crying, so we started preparing ourselves for the night. Since I hadn't eaten the whole time, I was starving. So I went to the river I found when I was wandering around. It was nearby and had some fish. As I made my way to the river, I sharpened a stick with a piece of rock to make a spear, and I was good to go. When I got to the river, I caught 6 fish and brought them back to camp. I also picked up sticks that were dry on my way back since I would need it for a fire. After a fourth of the night of being gone, I finally got back to camp. Then when the sun came upon the island again, I put rocks in a circle. Then I put some sticks in the circle, and I went on to light the sticks and put the fish on my spear to cook the fish over the fire. Soon after I was able to feed Eclipse, Caitlin, Kalish, Taylor, and me. I was still giving pity to Taylor, which you couldn't blame me for, and I know you're now trying to blame me right now. Trust me, don't attempt it or this book will come for you. But when we were eating, the others were staring at us enough to make me and everyone eating uncomfortable. One guy that looked like he's in his 30s. He was really 17 with red hair and grayish blue eyes. Even yelled at me, "Are you serious? Why didn't you get us food?" Another girl with grayish hair, ocean blue eyes, and was wearing a bright red dress, which was the worst outfit to wear, clutched her what she said, "Starving, puppy, a chihuahua, and I have no idea why it was allowed to stay with us," yelled, "Yeah. Why can't you have gotten us food?" More people joined in by yelling. One guy almost slapped Kalish before Caitlin gave him the death stare, and he nervously backed away as if Caitlin was going to literally kill him. Almost made me laugh, but I kept quiet. After everyone kept yelling for almost 4 minutes, I snapped. I say snapped, but I mean I was ready to punch someone like the guy that was going to punch Kalish. If you're starving so bad, go get your own food. I got this for my friends and Taylor since he could have died. I screamed loudly. Taylor looked down trying to figure out what I meant by friends and Taylor. But by the time I shoved the spear in the old-looking guy's arms, Taylor mumbled, "Am I not your friend?" I admittedly noticed what I said and apologized, but Taylor was still upset even though I'm pretty sure he knew what I meant. I gave the rest of the fish to the chihuahua and went to my tent to lay down. When the sun rested gently against the water, I decided to go for a stroll. After I finally pushed myself outside, I saw writing in rocks on the ground, which they had very little rocks, so it spelled, "Sorry yelling, need food." I giggled at the horrible written sentence, but I also rolled my eyes in rage knowing that they were just using me, but I saw a new rock-pointed spear in front of me. I sighed as soon as I picked up the spear as it felt weird. It felt like I was used to it and tried to remember something, but nothing came to me. I sighed and started walking. By the time I got to the river, I noticed leaves were crunching behind me, and I knew that everyone was asleep, so I walked faster. The leaf crunching got faster, so I squeezed my spear praying while I started to turn back. Soon I had an axe to my throat. I was ready to scream, but instead I took my spear and stabbed it backwards, knocking the mysterious person behind me to the ground. The person was a one-eyed girl with her other eye clawed out, and she looked nervous even though I wasn't planning to kill her. I then saw the dragon-like shadow, which I knew it wasn't planning to go since it was creeping closer, so I grabbed the girl's axe and ran as fast as I could. When I got to camp, I collapsed on the ground in shock. I couldn't move at all, which made the one guy who had blonde hair, grayish eyes, was wearing glasses, and was the only person awake at the time, pick me up. I passed out right when I was off the ground. I woke up sweating and shaking. Everyone was relieved to see me wake back up, but the guy who picked me off the ground was still making me rest. By the next day, I was ready to work again. When I got outside, everyone made me sit down and tell them what happened, so I did. People started to look nervously at each other. And Caitlin pulled me into a hug and gave me the axe I stole, which made me more nervous knowing that she had such a great weapon, but felt relieved when Kalish had the little cat in her arms, so I knew no one got injured. After the most boring sun movement, the moon came upon us. I was still recovering from what happened, but I picked myself up to go to the river because I knew we needed the food no matter what happened. I soon got my new axe and spear ready and started to walk to the river carefully, but right when I got to the entrance, Taylor claimed, "I'll come with you for protection. Like, consider it payback for saving me." I calmed down after hearing that sentence, and we started to walk. I started to hear the same leaf noise and looked and saw Taylor worried. He looked back at me and took my spear to leave me with the axe. He signaled me to turn around. I did, knowing Taylor had a plan, and there she was again, and she lunged at me with a sword in her hand and managed to scrap skin off my cheek before Taylor stabbed the side of her with the spear and using a pressure point to make her knocked out. I started to feel dizzy again, but Taylor hugged me and nervously laughed and whispered in my ear, "That's my payback." I nervously laughed and started to push back away from Taylor so I could grab my spear from him, picked up the girl, and kept walking. After the moon was almost on the ground, we had all the fish we caught at the river cooked for the group. One by one the islanders started to awaken, and by the time everyone had their own fish, settled down, and started munching on their fish, the princess-like cat emerged from the darkened forest. We also did tell the group what happened, and we kept the girl as a prisoner even though the red dress girl, who was named Rory, was screaming, "Just drown her." It'll be safer and less work. But we also decided that we'll take turns watching her, which I understood completely. Finally, the sun started to rise, and we started our day. Caitlin and I were the people in charge of the prisoner. This was fine with me, but Caitlin thought I shouldn't go near the prisoner. But that isn't what I'm focusing on today, because as soon as the prisoner woke up, I had an axe to her neck yelling, "What is your name?" The prisoner was shaking very badly and muttered, "Carrie." I sighed knowing that I had the upper hand. Carrie was looking at the forest very hard, so I told her, "Go to the campfire and sit down. I will be walking behind you, so don't attempt to run." Carrie followed the orders and sat down, and Caitlin patted her head. I soon started to ask her questions. "What is that shadow in the forest about?" Carrie looked down. "I'd rather not speak of the shadow." I looked at her disappointed, and you could tell Carrie started to get annoyed. Once it had been about 4 minutes of silence, Caitlin soon asked, "Well, do you have any useful information?" "No," Carrie admittedly said. Then Caitlin slapped her right in the face, which I didn't know how to respond. I looked at Carrie, who was tearing up, and asked, "May you please tell me why you were trying to attack me back there?" Carrie answered, "I am not going to expose the island." "Why?" Caitlin asked. Carrie looked up, and before we knew it, she had Caitlin pinned to the ground while staring at me with a warning face. This made me horrified, and when I say horrified, I mean shaking and feeling dizzy. Finally, my 10 or under brain cells caught up with what was happening, and I grabbed my axe and with all my remaining strength took a swing at Carrie and missed. Carrie looked like she was holding in a laugh and sprinted into the forest. Caitlin and I slowly turned our heads at each other, remembering one duo went into the forest this very morning. Caitlin whispered to me, "Just so you know, this is not my fault." She sprinted into the forest, leaving me standing there thinking, "These idiots. And this is coming from a dumb person." I sprinted towards her. I finally caught up to Caitlin, who was gathering the duo, who I found out were John and Atlas. John was a 20-year-old guy that somehow had a gun, which he said worked, but really didn't. He also had black hair, green eyes, and was an angel. And Atlas? He's some crazy Australian guy that's 19 with orange hair and blue eyes. They agreed to head back knowing we weren't joking since we seemed stressed to them. After a few minutes or so, we got back to camp, but I felt like something was behind me, so I looked back and there was nothing. I sighed and turned to Caitlin. "So what are we going to do?" I questioned harshly. Caitlin replied with a sigh and walked away, leaving me there. As the moon rose in the sky, the island became quiet since most of us were asleep. I, who was awake at the time, was sitting on a log around the campfire. Rory, the girl in the red dress, sat next to me quietly. I looked up at her and looked down, minding my own business, but Rory was mad because Carrie had escaped. "Why didn't you drown her like I did to that crazy old man?" Rory screamed at me. I thought, wait, crazy old man? Then it hit me, and I smacked Rory off the log. "What was that for?" I told him that the bottom of the ocean needed taped since he was trying to tape something, and he jumped headfirst into the water. Rory responded, "I really didn't know what to think about her anymore because that was a dumb move for both her and the crazy old man, so I just sat there staring at Rory." Soon enough, Kalish waked up from a nightmare and came to see what me and Rory were doing. "What's happening?" Kalish asked. I sighed. "Did you see that old guy on the beach a few days ago?" Kalish thought for a while. I looked right at Rory. "Go on." Rory looked at and rolled her eyes and mumbled. "I told him that the bottom of the ocean needed taped since he was trying to tape something, and he jumped headfirst into the water." Kalish, who was still half asleep, tiredly stared at Rory and sighed. "Why?" Kalish asked. Rory looked down, trying to think how she was going to get out of this situation, but failed. Chapter 2. Settle